Welcome back to Strange Stories with the Seeker and the Skeptic. Today we have the one and only Mr. Geoff Baer. Geoff is a seeker from my hometown. When I was in high school, he was everyone's favorite guidance counselor. He's gone through many different phases since then, with different positions, but one thing has always remained the same. He has been there to provide support and comfort to others. So welcome to the show, Geoff. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Absolutely.
Yeah. So before we get into ghost stories, because you have a ton and I'm really excited to hear all of those from you, I just want to talk to you a little bit about your Tai Chi practice. So I know that you are an instructor. I just want to know about that journey a little bit.
Um, it's been an interesting journey. It'll be, I believe, 13 years ago on my birthday, which is November 9th. I had a heart issue with my widowmaker being blocked. But about
Oh.
6 months before that, I started on this wellness kick. I got that taken care of very easily with modern technology and medicine. And then soon thereafter, I started getting brochures for this Kripalu Wellness Center. And I just happened to sign up for this Qigong with Dr. Yang Yang. And I went on a 3-day retreat there in February. And I came home and I didn't say a word to my wife about it because she was a little bit worried about keeping me tethered because I have so many interests. And so finally, after a week or so, she said, "Okay, when are you going to tell me about it?" So I just spewed everything out to her. And she said, "Well, then I guess you better sign up for that 5-day training in June." And that was about 11 years ago. So I just really have enjoyed my journey with it. I have been saddened because the practice has changed with Master Yang since COVID. He's, I don't want to say he's paranoid, but he's extremely cautious and stays very close to home in New York City and hasn't done any public training since COVID. So that's a real grief kind of thing. But, just the one local class that I've had, and that's ebbed and flowed, but flowed really, really nicely. And then in April, I started teaching for Dr. Christina and Dr. Matt Lipke. I do osteo and balance work with their patients for free under the guise of all the researched Tai Chi and Qigong. And it's really kind of cool. So it's humbling. And it's just been a great journey. Who knows where it'll go, but I feel really blessed with it. And yeah, it's changed my life without a doubt.
In what ways has it changed your life?
First and foremost, I rarely get angry.
Mm.
One of the first pearls of grandmother's wisdom that I learned from Grandmaster Yang is a couple of things of, don't take things personal, and everyone is looking out after their best interest. And those two in combination made me think, ooh. So I started to let go. And I've just gotten a lot more, I guess, philosophical. I mean, I've always not been a shallow person, but I really enjoy the journey in the holistic way. I've always used the term holistic my entire practice, even back before the new agey kind of thing came in. And then, the most recent, was finishing all of my Reiki training to be a Reiki Master. And that's just been a wonderful compliment to it as well. So I guess that answers your question, I hope.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. Yeah, I remember reading the four agreements, and the one agreement, don't take anything personally. Like, it changed my life. I'm like, I needed somebody to just say that to me, like that it's about other people, you know what I mean? And that, like you said, that people are kind of like, they're self-focused. They're looking out for their own interests, but it's not, how they treat us isn't really, it's more about them than it is about us.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I saw a meme recently. It's probably a cliche I just had not heard of before, but it was new to me. It said, "What other people think of me is none of my business." It
Right,
was
right.
a similar thought process. You deal with yourself, and then everything else kind of goes along with it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
for
true.
sure. Yeah. So you have a lot of wild stories that you shared with us, and I'm so excited to get into them with you. So tell us about like the earliest one that you can remember.
Well, I guess I would say overall, I've always been a seeker. No pun on your seeker and the skeptic, but I love it. And I've always been open because I think there's just so much out there in life. And I've always been attuned with difference. And this is kind of something different. So the earliest thing, my dad was an Episcopal minister, and he would take us on many little sojourns, and we were at this Bishop Stark's house, and the bishop was married, but he didn't have a wife at that time. He was an older gentleman, and I just remember having dinner at his house, and it was my younger brother and me and my mom and dad, and then this Bishop Stark, who was kind of a cool guy, a little reserved, but at one point, I was sitting at this dining room table with a clear view of the kitchen, and slam goes down the dishwasher door, and out starts flying, I think it was 1 or 2 forks. And I was like, whoa. And, Bishop Stark kind of just slowly turned his head and looked, and then, saw what had happened. And then he looked back, and he never said anything about it. And we didn't either. And my parents were the kind of people where, appearance was everything. So we didn't even really talk about it.
Wow.
That was kind of an interesting type of thing. So that was the start. That was back when I was probably 15, 14, something like that. But then in college, I experienced a couple of things with like an extraterrestrial kind of UFO thing. And they were just really quick things. Maybe one of the two, I was possibly under the influence. So, there's always that skeptic part of me. But the other one was like, holy smokes. I looked at my girlfriend at the time. She saw exactly what I did. And again, it was on my birthday. Oh, I just remembered that. So, interesting energy. It was on my birthday. We were leaving the dining hall at SUNY Oswego, and we saw this, thing out over the lake, and we looked at each other, then looked back at the lake, and it was gone. So
Oh, wow.
that was pretty wild. It was kind of calm from there until I met my wife, and I was about 28 or 29 when I met my wife. And unfortunately, we started officially dating 2 days before her sister killed herself in a DWI.
Oh, wow.
So about 2 weeks after Linny died, we were driving down her long driveway to her folks' house, and her folks weren't there, but there was a really big picture window in the front of the house on the driveway side, and then it goes through the thinness of the house, and they lived on Owasco Lake, one of the Finger Lakes, so you could see, very bright, it wasn't a dark setting. So we pulled in, and then Kathy and I both looked up, saw Linny in the bay window, facing the driveway. We looked at each other in that cliche classic way, and then looked back, and she was gone. But it was really interesting because I have read up a lot on ghosts and extra, types of things like that. And they say that when people die from tragic trauma base, that sometimes they don't know that they, have passed. And it was horrific. And I won't get into the specifics, but it was really horrific. And I think she was really anchored to the house because that was where she was living at the time when it happened. So that was kind of an interesting thing. And then it got a little bit tame for a while, but then about 3-4 years later, Kathy and I moved from Skinny Atlas up to Oswego, and I met this family, and it was kind of nice because we had one of our sons. My wife was pregnant with our second, and she came home and she said, "Oh, I can't do this work thing." She's a teacher, and I was like, "Oh my God, how are we going to afford to live?" So I met this older couple that have a number of properties in Oswego, but the house that I didn't know the prominence that they owned was called it's called the Tonkin House. And the Tonkin House is famous for its folklore story in Oswego of the girl in the glass coffin. So I can't remember exactly when I learned about the girl in the glass coffin. It was probably when Rosemary Nesbitt, who was a professor of theater at the college, did one of her ghost tale tellings about all the things around Oswego. And I was like, wow, I'm working in that house. Now, the house itself has a back section of 2 stories where the owners lived. And then in the front prominent side on Fifth Street, there's 5 apartments, 2 on the first floor, 2 on the second, and then a large prominent apartment on the third floor where the owner's wife's sister lived with her significant. So over time, the first things I experienced was I renovated almost all of the apartments on the first and second floor, in a period of about 10, 15 years. And there was always an incredibly subtle presence feeling, and I'm very sensitive to energy and feeling, of somebody watching. And I think you hear that a lot with different stories. But nothing out of the ordinary. But it was a soft, very gentle, subtle, somebody's watching. Now, the first time I ever experienced something in the house, I was sanding the entryway floors of the grand entrance, and it's really, really stately. And as I was sanding, and actually, I think I was staining the floor that morning, they have a floor to ceiling umbrella hat stand and this huge, like 12-foot tall mirror. And it's not original to the house, but it has been in the house, and it's very old. House is probably at least 200 years old. So I look up just, as a pause in staining the floor, and here's this face of a woman looking back at me in the mirror. And I was like, oh, and then I look down, and again, in that cliche, I look up and there's nothing there. Now, I know that mirrors tend to be, I don't know, I'll use the word softly portals, but you don't really know where they come from or what they do. But I did not know until I saw that face. And then I started to do a little bit more looking into the house. And I never would talk to the owners about it just because they didn't appear to be open to those kind of discussions. So I just kept it to myself. But I did find out that the first apartment that I really felt the presence was the girl's bedroom. And I spent a lot of time in there because the owner's mother lived in that apartment for years and years, and she would always have me in for coffee and Irish soda bread. And I would always sit in the bump out window that faces Fifth Street and just always, felt this joyful, light, happy presence. And I believe that was the little girl who had passed, because the story was in, I believe, the Spanish flu time in the early 1900s. She unfortunately contracted that and died. She was approximately 11. And so the mother was so grieved that she put her in a glass coffin in the first floor parlor that was also in that same bump out. And it faced Fifth Street, and the big school nearby was St. Mary's. So in the day, a lot of students were walking to this Catholic school, and they would be late for school. And so finally, people complained to the health department, because in the early 1900s, there weren't a lot of health laws, public health laws. And so they made the family inter the body, but they built this gorgeous mausoleum at the Riverside Cemetery that I've seen, from the outside. It's just really a beautiful structure, honor to the daughter, but also for the rest of the family. So that was my first real kind of local kind of thing. Then I met a woman who was an art professor, and there's only really one huge, gigantic Italianate style Gothic home on Gray Road. And it's always been reported that it was haunted. Gray Road has had many sleuthy people checking things out. It's lots of stories and folklore. But this woman, Jackie, had lost her husband to cancer, and she was in need to have a lot of work done at the house. And so I still, part-time, did carpentry. And each summer she would go to their family camp up in Canada, And so she would just give me the run of the house. And one summer we did a roof, one summer we did the siding, and another summer we did the windows. And this is just an enormous house. And so when we were doing the windows, I was walking through the house with all my, gear on, nail aprons and hammer and whatever. And I was walking through the second of the three main rooms. It was a dining room. And I felt this huge hand give me a really big shove. And I'm 200 pounds, 6 foot. And I turned around because I thought it was my friend and business partner, Bill. And I look around and there's absolutely nobody there. Now, oddly, that's the only thing that ever happened at that house. And I never shared that with anybody in the house, the owner or her son. Again, just people that didn't necessarily believe in that, never brought it up. So I never brought it up either. So that was an interesting type of thing. When I retired from public school back in 2014, I treated myself to a really nice original ghost hunter. They call them Strange Escapes. That's the name of the brand. Adam Berry and Amy Bruni, spinoffs from the Ghost Hunter people. And they had this thing up in the Houghton Mansion in North Adams, Massachusetts. And they only allowed 3 groups of 10 people. And then they rotated Adam and Amy taking people through the home. And it was a pretty prominent home in its day. And what tragedy they had was back in the early days, one of their people that worked for them became their chauffeur because it was the beginning of the gasoline cars. And unfortunately, in North Massachusetts, the roads were still horse and buggy. And the story goes that the chauffeur, who was just a servant, became the chauffeur, got the tire in a rut, and it flipped the car over, and the woman in the house died. And he was so, grief-stricken from killing this woman that they had served, for years and years and years, that he committed suicide in the servants' quarters in the top floor of the mansion. And it was cool. So I was with Adam Berry, and he did this experiment 3 or 4 times with our small group. We were up in the empty room, just a few chairs for people to sit on if they wished. And every time he closed the door to the room, you heard footsteps, and they were like boots on wooden floors. It was so distinct. And I was just like, wow, this is just cool. And everybody was really into it. In that same evening, when I spun off with Amy Bruni, the mansion was bought by a Masonic lodge, and they built a huge, prominent lodge space. And one of the things she did was one of those classic little 3 flashlight experiments where you get the flashlight just so sensitive that you ask yes, no questions, and they turn one on for yes, touch another one for no. And she used one of my flashlights, and she was disgusted because I was the only one in the group of 10 that had one. So she had to run out and get a couple others. But the other thing in that grand Masonic lodge room that was part of this place, you could actually hear and see the leather in a number of the seats go down and then back up as, the sense of a prominence of some ghostly spirit sitting in it and then moving. There wasn't a noise to that, but besides the leather moving. And these, were original and older, seats. The third thing in the house was there was always known to be a lot of children in the house before the family dissolved and sold it and left. And some of the kids used to love to play down in the basement. And so they warned us, they said, just be careful, because the playful child spirit that they believed was in the basement loves to tug on things. So I had an iPad and my wallet and a few other things on his shoulder, type of thing. And I purposefully put myself at the back of this 10, 12 person group. And darn, if we didn't come around the corner going from one room to the other, and that thing just got yanked to the point where I really felt it in the crease of my shoulder to my arm. So, and that was my first go to someplace else kind of thing. So that was really kind of cool. Locally, I think I was one of the few people that wrote to ghost hunters when they did a public request of haunted places to go and scope out. And this is years ago. And unbeknownst to anybody in our community, the ghost hunter people came to Fort Ontario uh, and Oswego, and they filmed for 4 days. And they had some really amazing things happen. But what I experienced there myself was one Halloween, they did a ghost tour with groups, and they took you down into the really huge stone. I don't know, I'll call them ramparts. I don't know what they call.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, the woman said, we've had some amazing experiences tonight, because I wasn't the first group that night. And I believe it was the 30th of October, because they did them for a few nights leading up to Halloween. But the woman was in period dress with a big bustle and the hoop, and she had her hair all done up in a Victorian way. And then she, kind of put her hand up and cautioned us to be quiet. And she said, listen, and you hear a little skipping. And then you hear this little male voice say, hey, lady, nice dress. And then you hear the skipping go right away. And she said, we've had that happen a couple times in the last few nights that they did that.
Wow.
Now, that's the only thing that I've experienced at the fort, but
Mm-hmm.
that was pretty profound. I just really, really love it. And really, the last one that I think is worthwhile. I bought an old Victorian house with my former business partner, and we always felt like we weren't alone. It was nothing that took away from business. We didn't have to warn people, but I knew that there were kids in the past that had passed away in the home. And I turned to look into one of the play therapy rooms one day, and there's this little blonde-haired girl. It was the biggest, most vibrant apparition, and it was in the middle of the day. A blonde-haired little girl in an old period, frock, kind of like an aprony kind of thing. And then again, I guess my reaction is I'm like startled. So I look away and then I look back and she's gone. But it was also the time within a couple days when we heard that one of our therapists was pregnant. And I swore it was the little girl just saying, that she was going to have a little girl, but she ended up having a son. But that was kind of cool. But I just have always been a person that gets touched a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's never been, a malicious thing. It's always been gentle or playful, and it's just been really kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like you're kind of one of those people, I describe Erin, my sister, as a ghost magnet, and it seems like you might be one of those people too.
Yeah.
When, like the first one, when you're at the bishop's house, how did you, at 15 years old, how did you explain that to yourself, since you didn't talk about it with anybody?
Well, I think even back then, while there weren't all the TV shows, because this is still probably when we had black and white TV, maybe we had a color set, but there weren't the ghost shows on Discovery channels and things like they have now. I read a lot. So I just kind of resolved it as, oh, cool. And I just have always been open to difference. And that was
Mm-hmm.
something very different. So while we didn't talk much about it, my younger brother remembers it. And so, if it was just me, maybe, but, for the bishop, just in the coolest, slow way, just to look, see it, acknowledge it, and then he just turns back. It was kind of silly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an unexplained thing that, we can't figure out how to talk about it. So we're just going to kind of look
Yep.
the other way. Yeah. What was it like for your wife when you both saw her sister?
Um, I wouldn't say she doesn't like to talk about it. She is definitely more of a skeptic, but I think at times, I think skeptics, certainly my wife, she's more gifted, and I think she draws more things to her than she'll ever
Hmm.
acknowledge. For her, I think it was kind of comforting because she knew I was open to things, and we made it a process of letting go. Uh,
Hmm.
it was just a horrific, horrible thing,
Yeah.
but it kind of allowed her to think, okay, what can we do to, make sure Lenny's on her way? because she definitely was lingering.
Hmm.
I would believe other people experience things in her family, but her family's Irish Catholic and they don't talk about such.
Yeah.
Um, but I think for my wife, she definitely it helped her to kind of let go a little bit.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think Adam Berry just wrote a book about that, like how kind of like people who do experience some of these paranormal things can really like help work through grief. I haven't read it, but I've seen advertisements for it, and I think there definitely is something there, of just having that comfort of knowing like, okay, my loved one's okay.
Right.
Yeah, that actually
Yeah.
only came out like about 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's called Goodbye Hello. It's like on my list of things to get. It seems
Yeah.
it's a really interesting take on all of this stuff,
Yeah.
to me at least.
Yeah.
Because processing grief is hard,
Hmm.
letting go of people who you're not, who, especially when they're very young, and it's not like she was. Like it is very difficult to make your brain deal with something like that in a way that's not going to make things kind of worse in your own head.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So it was, and it was one of those things where I had been taking some classes in spirituality on or around that time. And so I made it a task to kind of like talk to Marlon, tell her it's okay to go to the other side. And Kathy was really cool with that. And we did it in the house, when nobody else
Hmm.
was around, and just kept her, passing over in our daily walk for a while. And then it just seemed to kind of dissipate. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, I'm just a little jealous about your experience with Adam Berry and Amy Bruni.
Well,
That sounds so cool.
they're doing something at the end of the month out in Palmyra, but it was $300. They were limiting it again to 3 groups of 10. And I was like, right now it's like there's choices and it wasn't a choice for me. But
Hmm.
Strange Escapes is the name of their group. And they go to some really prominent places. Like they've gone to these big hotels that are well known. I can't think of one. I think that's out. Maybe where The Shining was reckoned to be at. When they did that movie with Jack Nicholson.
The
Hmm.
Stanley.
Yeah, the Stanley Hotel, and they just go to these great places. They did a cruise too. A whole cruise ship of ghost hunters went, and they just had a huge, wonderful time going up to Alaska and back. Uh,
Oh,
so yeah, if there's expendable money, that could be a good thing because they were really, really approachable. They did great public speaking in the public parts. Amy got a little testy at the end of the night. I figured maybe she needed more sleep. She just was getting pissed off the way some people were not taking it seriously,
oh,
maybe ruining the vibe. But it was really good to see these people because they're humans just like us.
yeah.
It's just they've really come up. I mean, Amy Bruni, starting with the original, you know, TAPS team from
Hmm.
Rhode Island, that's kind of neat.
Yep.
And I have enjoyed all the shows that have come out and allow you to experience and see. Uh, yeah.
Yeah. We were supposed to see her a couple of weeks ago, but I got super sick, so we didn't end up going because she was here in Roanoke doing a talk.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully one day we'll connect and be able to make it. But
Yeah.
it was a very cool experience you had. How has working with energy through Tai Chi and Reiki, has that changed things for you? You've always been sensitive, but has it made you more sensitive or does it feel kind of the same?
Oh my gosh, it definitely has made me more sensitive.
Mhm.
Uh, it's an interesting, and I guess I'll use the word quality, just that's what popped into my head, but I have always been sensitive, but now I'm able to hone a little bit better. My wife is the person that I'm most wildly connected with. And so it's just, I hate in some ways that I just know her mood just by a single glance,
Yeah.
single look at her. I can just feel that something's going on. Um, the same thing. I mean, it doesn't happen to me like out in public waiting online at the supermarket, but other people that I have a connection with, I just sometimes I wish I could turn it off because I do. I feel the energy. Um, oh, I forgot to tell you this. So this will help to answer the question. So I have just a few friends I reconnected with from high school at our 40th reunion, which was about 7 years ago. So last week, I think I went up for 3 days to Vermont, and they live in a 280-year-old farmhouse that's had many lives. But
Oh.
they have this history book. And if you've seen these pictures of Victorian women, they're always dressed in dark colors with the horrible frowning faces. So there was one with the five daughters of their home, and they call them the Happy Sisters. Now, they warned me that the room I stayed in, which did happen, that I was going to feel a presence possibly. They've been touched. They've had lots of different things in many parts of their house, but they said particularly the room where I was. So when I did get ready for bed, I did have a kind of like a crystal grid, laid out on the nightstand just as a precautionary. But I talked to these entities and I said, I just come in peace. I respect you. I love your home. And twice during the first evening, I was just touched so gently on my knee when I was laying on my left side. And it was just the coolest thing. I felt it was a female presence. So when you say, how has your sensitivity changed with the Tai Chi and the Reiki? Things just, the intuition screams. And that's what I wish sometimes. I wish I could turn off the sensitivity of the intuition because I've always had intuition. I've never been able to use it for the lotto or for parking spaces that are open at a busy mall or that kind of thing. But I just sense stuff all the time. And I have learned that if I don't act on it or say something, I usually get a headache. And that's one of my first teachers said that that's frequently something that might happen is you're blocking this energy, this vision, this guidance that's coming to you, let it out, and deal with it. So I do let stuff out more and I do reach out to people when I get a strong sense. And there's a few people that are not even physically close to me in this part of the country. And I'll just get a sense, and inevitably, especially it's a former friend from high school, and she lost her dad, who she was very close with. And every time I get an inkling, I reach out to her, and she says, "Oh my gosh, you're at it again. You're right on par." Yep, I'm having a tough day, and thank you so much for reaching out. So if I can do that type of stuff, because I never felt odd with these gifts. I just knew I was put on this earth to help share them. And that's been satisfying, whether it be Tai Chi, Reiki, counseling, all of the above. Yeah.
Yeah. I totally understand what you're saying. Like being an empath myself, and being a helper, it's a beautiful thing because it helps you just be in tune with the person that you're supporting or that you're working with. And there's times where it can be overwhelming, where you're like, okay, there's just so much energy, or just like, I need it to be a little like less intense, what I'm reaching or what I'm receiving from you. So I totally understand like that duality there of like, it's a beautiful gift. And it's sometimes like, I just want to turn it off a little bit.
I know. It doesn't scream at me as much as some people. Do you two know a woman by the name of Cindy Kaza?
Mm-mm.
She's a psychic medium, and she's had a couple of TV shows on the Discovery Channel. But she also came to the Funny Bone Comedy Shop in Syracuse, and I went and saw her last year with Mark Grindle, and she didn't pick up on any presence that wanted to come to talk to me, but she speaks a lot, and I've read a little bit about her work, where she has a really hard time turning it off, and that's a tough thing. Like she'll just be out for something social, and stuff will pop in, and she's like, "Come on, I just want to be normal."
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if our normal is the same as everybody else, but it's definitely different. Yeah.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, and I mean that's a hard situation too. We talked to, somebody who she's a medium, and she's like, I don't like to do like drive-by psychic readings on people, like I'm like just walking in the supermarket and like something's coming through, and it's like, how do you go up to a stranger and be like, hey, so your dad who passed
Yeah.
is here,
Yeah.
like that's just it's yeah, it's an interesting way like how it works, and like you said, like you find a lot of meaning and purpose in it for yourself. Oh,
Yeah, and I think the more that I work with it, the brighter I get, the brighter.
mm-hmm.
And,
Sure.
and that sometimes attracts things that aren't great, but that's okay. I
Mm-hmm.
have great boundaries and I have a great support system. So if I am a little off, because my energy does get, off sometime. I mean, once, I don't know, oh, I know. So there was a bad situation at this big house on Gray Road that I told you about getting shoved at. The owners had sold it. She had moved out. She has bad Parkinson's, and she wanted to live closer to her son in Baldwinsville. And unfortunately, kids that were homeless broke into the house, and they were living there, squatting there before it was sold. And they did a lot of ritualistic, satanic kind of stuff there. So they broke into the house through a glass plate door. And when we finally went to check on the house as it was getting ready to be closed on for the new owners, the son and I, were just aghast. But something glammed on to me, and it took a long time, like weeks, to work with Robin Waterbury, my Reiki Master trainer, to get all that residual stuff. And she talked a lot about how black and gooey and kind of weird, because I was just too bright and I was unprotected. I was
Wow.
into a house, but I didn't protect myself when I went. So, boom, there you go, Geoff.
Wow. So could she see that? Like I know Robin a little bit, but could she see that in your energy field?
Oh, she could definitely see it. And there
Yeah,
were two of these odd wasps that manifested at the first healing that I did at her studio for that. And she got stung when she
really.
tried to take it out of me. So that's kind of cool. I've never had a physical manifestation of something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty powerful.
Do you have practices that you use to protect yourself now?
Oh, absolutely. Everything from the dry rubs to Palo Santos, sage, crystal grids, just praying that white light all around me. Um, and then also with, things like, stepping into the blue flame, some Reiki principles and things that will protect you that way. So,
So
yeah.
just for clarification, a big part of what I do in these conversations is whenever someone mentions something that maybe someone who's a little less initiated into what the person's talking about, I kind of try to ask a question that a listener might ask. Can you tell us a little bit about what a crystal grid is, what that is, kind of what it means, what it can do?
Yeah. So the crystal grids, the way I would try to explain it in as simple a way, a layman's term, is there are vibrations in this entire world. And if you're into stones, gems, kind of like, maybe your sister, excuse me. So certain crystals will give off good vibrations to protect, and others will be there to suck bad energy out of a situation. So, everybody, I mean, there's countless things, places where people can go to get these things. I had an experience with these stones where Robin went to a special training down in New Mexico. And when she went to Sedona, she was told in her psyche to pull over, and she found these three stones. And these three red rock stones from Sedona literally bounced in your hands. And it was really, really cool. They weren't perfectly round, but round enough. And they just literally bounced, especially with your energy. If your energy was good, they would bounce. If your energy was more skeptical, they would just sit there more. So the grids, the crystals, we could spend a whole episode just talking about
Yeah.
those things. I have certain life crystals that were given to me that I don't let anybody else touch. There's a amethyst, very special amethyst on a handmade necklace thing that I use to do chakra kinds of balancings and stuff like that. So, everything has a purpose, but basically stones give off energy, and it's physics, it's science. It's like static electricity. You scuff your feet along the carpet in the, very low humidity winter, you touch somebody and that energy sucks. You get that zap. And that's the way I explain it, whether it be Tai Chi or these crystals. Um, Everything has a vibration. And so you use the vibration for, hopefully good purpose and healing, and some cleanse and some give you better strength.
And the grid part is typically using what they call like sacred geometry, which is, I'm not going to explain it very well, but it's, kind of like the building blocks of like physical reality is how I understand it. And so that, like, the different patterns, there's different ones, like the seed of life, the flower of life, or you can just do kind of like a mandala type shape, but the pattern itself in conjunction with the crystals creates a vibration. And then you can kind of set intentions, right? That, like, so for you in those situations, are you setting, like, what kind of intention are you setting with the crystal grid to kind of protect you?
Well, I'll give you specifically there. I did a side job for a man that unfortunately had a Trump hat on, and he was an older gentleman, and my intuition was screaming, saying, don't take this job. But I did, because I try to be good to elderly people. I now know that his intention was just to rip me off. And I did the work, and then he wanted me to come back, and I did that when he was out of town having a procedure done, but he hasn't paid me. And then on top of that, he called in this crazy rant to complain to the owner of the lumberyard that gives my name out, because I do specialty little work that other people don't want to get involved with. I try to help older people or widows and things like that. And, basically, the protection was for him because he was in my psyche. He was in my head. I let him get in. And so I did like a grid recently this past week. And there was also another little ruffle with a past job. Some contractors say you didn't make the big time if you don't get sued. I only got sued once in 30 plus years. But then I had somebody else complain about something that really had no leg to stand on. And so it was twofold this week, just a lot of heavy emotion. And I didn't want to carry that. So I would just pray to it and get some Reiki from it. And then I'd go on my way a little bit more balanced and a little bit able to face whatever the day, took upon me.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're kind of your intention is to transmute that energy. Like, those situations are in a lower, heavier vibration. It doesn't feel good, right? And so it's like, that's not what you want to carry with you. So I'm going to use my Reiki practices or my crystal grid to kind of elevate or just shift the energy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's awesome. I'm sorry those things happen to you, though.
Yeah, me too. Because people are like, what, Geoff, you're the kindest person in the world. How could this? I was like, it happened. I should listen to my intuition. And then the stupider thing was I even went back and did a second little job, thinking that I would resolve everything. And this guy just right from the first get-go, he was just going to take it and not pay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's wild.
Yeah,
that's super interesting stuff for sure. And I'm just curious about this. What you kind of briefly mentioned the term blue flame. What does that mean? What's the context for that?
Well, one of the final training things with the Reiki is a term daikomyo, and at least the way that it vision wise came to me, Robin Waterbury also, before I started my Reiki training, she would come to some of my Tai Chi classes because she sensed that there was such a similarity to what she did and what I did. And so she would tailor a lot of what she taught me, to what I would use. And so she knew I was very visual, and she knew at times I didn't always cleanse myself or protect myself. So we talked back and forth, and this dicomio fourth, thing that we do when we're getting ready to do Reiki. She said, envision yourself stepping into this blue flame, and there's nothing, you're impervious. Things can't get at you. It's like a universal light of flame that's just going to be there to protect you from everything. So, some people in the past, as a counselor, in a similar way, Jonathan, I talk about chain mail, like from the old knights in shining armor, and that seems to resonate with people. I was like, if you're in a situation of fear, or you're worried about a situation, put on your chain mail ethereally, and it's impervious. You can't get stuck. It won't go through. And the old standby too is, I like an ethereal white light, the purest light. Just paint, it all around you. So it's very similar to those types of things.
Gotcha. That's very interesting for sure.
Do you know if there was a specific significance to it being the blue flame?
There is a Mount Shasta in California, and there's a type of very odd colored glass that comes from there, kind of like what Erin looks for out in the woods and the different places she goes. But when Robin got a shipment of some of this Shasta glass, she said, I want you to take one. And it was during this training process. And I grabbed like this funky blue color. And I'm usually not drawn to blue, but she said, okay, and then she just said, this is for you. So this Shasta glass, it's the only place in the world where they find it and they mine it. And whether it's a spaceship that crashed there and broke all sorts of things and heated stuff up that melted, I don't know. I don't have those skills and knowledge, but she said it was based on that stone or that, rock that they had mined there that she gave me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. I've definitely heard stories about the Mount Shasta thing over the years. So that's super interesting for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard of like the violet flame. I just hadn't heard of the blue flame, but it's like it's very significant to you and your energy, which is very cool.
Right.
Did Robin train you in Holy Fire Reiki? Or
Yes.
is it? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the first things she did. And I won't say she expedited my training, but I was showing her Karuna symbols before I even, did any Karuna training.
Oh,
And she
really?
was like, oh my gosh, Geoff, I really got to work with you because you're seeing stuff and experiencing stuff that you don't know what's really going on. So that was kind of cool.
That's
Yeah.
very
Very
cool.
interesting.
Were you so like in meditation you were seeing them, or where were you seeing the
Oh
symbols?
yeah, it would be definitely meditation. I think it started first when Robin would do just like a monthly healing on me, just a regular Reiki. And then she got into something called chumpy stones. These
Yes.
chumpy stones come from, the Peru area, basically, or down in that area of South America. And I see the chumpies open into all these little cosmic things. Maybe like if you're familiar with anime and Totoro and all the little black, funny things, like I describe it like that. But when I started to draw the symbols, and I said they're all interconnected and into this chumpy stuff, and she was like blown out of the water. And I started seeing them when I would receive treatments. I would try not to work while she was working on me, but then we would have these elaborate conversations. She's like, Geoff, you never do anything but amaze me what I see. And all the healers around your table when I'm working on you, I almost have to push them out of the way because of all these spirit guides. And I believe too in seven generations before and seven generations in front that also lead some of this spirit guide stuff. I don't know if you've ever heard of that kind of context.
I have not.
No,
Very.
Yeah,
neither have I. That's
the
interesting.
seven generations of people that come before and the seven generations that come after you. So it's kind of an interesting thing. And seven is one of my real signature numbers.
Mhm.
It's just always been a big one. So
That's super interesting. I mean, I know I've heard of people talking about working with their ancestors and everything like that. I've never heard of people talking about working with the energy of the generations to come. That's fascinating.
yeah, yeah. And I guess it kind of makes sense. Sometimes I hear about these research things about people experiencing past life and then they connect it more with DNA and
Hmm.
DNA passing, from those generations. So, I mean, some of the scientific premise I like, some of it I just like to feel.
Yeah.
One of my spirit guides is super sarcastic, and my wife always cautions me, Geoff, you really should be careful who you talk to about this, because I was offered a part-time gig to be a teaching assistant with this great meditation silent retreat person at Kripalu. And there was something really holding me back. And I did a meditation, and a Pearl Jam song, Not For You, came into mind. And it was my spirit guide saying, "This is not for you, bump, bump." And I was like, okay, I get it, get out of my head. But it was in my head for like hours.
Uh-huh.
I think it was worried that I was going to, take this gig and not, be my true destiny for that. But,
Hmm.
all sorts of weird stuff happen like that.
Hmm. Yeah.
No, if we're open to it, it's amazing what comes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just seems like you've always been open, and even like your early experiences, you didn't meet those things with fear. It was just like curiosity.
Right, right.
Yeah. The true seeker.
Yeah.
I've been trying to figure out how to ask people this question, so I'm going to just try to ask it. But how do you think all of this works? How do the afterlife, spirits, why we see them sometimes, why we're some people are more sensitive to energies, like how does this all work?
Well, for me, I believe that we're born as more of a pure energy, and that as we age in typical American society, or maybe all around the world, but I only know America, we shut down those senses that we have. Personally, I believe that there's not a sixth sense. I believe personally that a sixth sense or a sensitivity is all of our five senses honed together, working together. I think that's where intuition comes from. I also believe that, we talked just a hair about afterlife kind of things. Like, I believe that the veil of what we see or sense of the next after this physical life that we're experiencing right now, I think the veil all the time, maybe less thickness at this time of the year, but I just believe that we're matter. We're nuclear kind of organic matter energy. Sometimes we manifest in certain ways, and other times we may manifest in other ways. I believe in this regeneration, coming back to earth in a new spirit. I will swear that one of our sons came back as a gay male to live the life of a gay male that lost his life during the initial parts of AIDS before treatment was for that. There's other things, that I just believe. I am very, very open, but I really believe we're just matter. We're energy. And sometimes our energy is a certain look and other times not. When we pass, I mean, I've really, really, well, I used to do some hospice spiritual support, especially at the end of life. And the things I've experienced with a few handful of people, just when they were transitioning, oh my gosh, it just made me believe, okay, I don't fear death. I don't fear what's next, because it's just all part of a cycle. And we regenerate and we go. And there's kids that I was a counselor for in high school, say, that just were like hippie ass kids when hippie ass wasn't a big deal. And I swear that they were probably kids that overdosed back in the 60s or 70s, and now they're regenerated because they live this life. So I don't know. Does it give me comfort? Yeah. So maybe that's why I'm drawn to things to think like that. Uh, I don't know. And the whole thing about the golden rule, just love one another as you would love, want to be loved yourself. And, I'm grateful for everything. Some days are easier than others. I learned to be grateful for pain, although I don't necessarily like that. Not that either of you have ever suffered any pain. He said tongue in cheek, Um, so I don't know. Did that answer your question about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just interesting to hear everybody's different perspectives. I think people do think about it in similar ways. Sometimes our language is just a little bit different, but I love what you said just a moment ago about like being grateful for every experience, even including your pain, and that is not something that's easy for people to embrace, that ideology of like our pain is here for a reason. It's telling us something, or there's a lesson here, or there's an opportunity for us to grow, so being able to have that kind of like just that outlook, I'm sure, is very just it's a good thing. It's a good thing to have.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. When and if you guys come back up north, or who knows where my life will take me, but if I'm in Roanoke, I would love to sit in person and share a meal,
Yes.
talk more. I know I've said this to you, Brittany, when you were last up, but Jonathan, I'm just so happy for you two.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome. I love what you're doing. The love that I sense from your posts and your lives together. I couldn't be more happy for you. So
Thank
just
you.
Thank you very much.
keep it up, and just enjoy the rest of your day.
We
You
sure
as
will.
well.
You
Thank you
enjoy
for
your
having us
day
talk with
too.
us.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Thanks,
Nice,
Geoff.
nice
All
to
right,
meet you,
take care.
full shore. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for being here. If you have a strange story you want to share with us, email us at seekerandskeptic@gmail.com. We look forward to talking to you soon.